I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us. Happy Monday to everybody out there. If you're just joining us, you've found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. We have a great show for you. We're going to be talking really a whole lot about the issues in the news of the day. We're going to get to this later in the program, but one of the things I'm most excited about will be some inside baseballs. You want to stay tuned to some inside baseball with what happened Friday in the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee. This is a part of our ongoing coverage of the 92nd General Assembly of the, of the state of Arkansas at the Marble Palace. It's funny. I tell you what, it's really funny. Last week, we were very critical of the Department of Finance and Administration, which is essentially the, Arkansas's version of the IRS, right? So we were very critical of the Department of Finance Administration last week because they're essentially putting out phony estimates for what bills, and you can obviously prove that it's phony one way or the other. They have the same exact fiscal impact statement for an old bill, a draft piece of legislation. The current piece of legislation is different, has different language in there that generates more revenue, and yet they just apply the same financial impact statement to it. Then they go and they tell the committee that here are our numbers. Now, even their own numbers add up to a net tax increase until 2027. Specifically, we're talking about the internet sales tax bill that passed through both chambers of the House last week and is now, of course, it was already a part of the governor's budget. And so, here we are. But I was pretty critical of DF&A last week, and wouldn't you know, on last Friday, the Senate Revenue and Tax Committee, at least Senator Jonathan Dismang, seemed to have had enough of DF&A. Now, not anything specific to the internet sales tax or anything like that, but a completely different bill that DF&A likes to call technical corrections, from what I can hear. I mean, if you go back and watch the video, it's quite fascinating. But it has to do with trusts in the state of Arkansas. So apparently, and again, inside baseball, but it's pretty interesting what happens and what government bureaucrats, the lengths they will go to try to get one leg up over the taxpayer in potential litigation at some point in the future. So apparently, Arkansas is one of 3 states in the entire nation that doesn't actually have codified or adopted the federal government's laws when it comes to trusts and how to tax them, how to tax trusts. So because that's not official, DF&A has been administering that tax on trusts in Arkansas as just a rule. And you see where we're going here. So they've been taxing people without the statutory authority, one might argue. And this all was laid bare in committee on Friday. And, of course, the governor, this is what's so fascinating. It was DF&A's own bill at first, and then people amended it to where it could potentially give a leg up to taxpayers who have maybe been really defrauded by their own government. And now all of a sudden the governor's office doesn't support it. And now all of a sudden DFNA has another fiscal impact statement that say, now if you pass our own bill at this point, if you pass our own bill, it's actually now going to cost the state of Arkansas $20 million. And the governor no longer supports his own bill. Anyway, I know, again, that's inside baseball here in the state of, but it was fascinating if you go and watch the video. By the way, I'm very thankful at this point, very thankful, that state of Arkansas, the Arkansas Senate, is streaming their Senate committees. It makes things, what goes on over at the Senate is very interesting sometimes. But if you look at it, I mean, from what I can tell, the Department of Finance and Administration didn't have the best week ever. And I'll tell you more about that later in the program, when we're going to get, we're going to actually play the video for you, because you've just got to see this. It's pretty fascinating how things work. So coming up at the bottom of this hour, I'm going to introduce you to a woman by the name of Renee Jolly. She is the parent of a son who was falsely accused by a female student and wrongfully expelled from his university. So there was an allegation. It was a false allegation. And the son was expelled and his life was ruined. Now, does that sound familiar? Where have we seen that in maybe high-profile news? The Covington High School students, right? Now, they weren't, like, kicked out of their school, but what their lives were. I mean, good luck going to college, you know? So, anyway, we're going to talk a little bit to Miss Renee here. I'm going to get her take on this. I thought this was interesting. Later in the week, I'm going to be talking with, this is interesting. Later in the week, we're going to be talking to a guy by the name of Kevin Pryslak on Wednesday. He's author of a satirical book called The Mueller Report, or the Mueller Report, the complete and final findings against President Donald Trump. And so it's like 1,064 word book, and most of the pages are blank. So it'll be fun. It's going to be fun to have him on. This is the last week, though, of the General Assembly here in Arkansas. From what we can tell, they are all saying they're going to adjourn on Wednesday of this week. And so we're going to have to, wait and see what happens. But, we'll be covering it as normal. We're going to let you know what's going on. And who knows what last-minute bills might be going through or attempted to, or who knows what vigorous debates await us this week. So, the whiteboard behind me still has a plethora of, taxes on it. Tax, because that appears to be a lot of what I've been interested in, a lot of what the people, from what I can tell, the people are interested in, is how much more money. Again, what have we said as we approach the end of the legislative session? What is it that we have said from the beginning? And not even the very beginning of session, but the lead up to it, the months, all last year, really, is that we as conservatives need to be able to agree on the definition of words and phrases. A phrase like tax cut, a phrase like tax increase, a phrase like revenue neutral. What are those definitions? And at the end of the day, there are competing. The reason you got to know what there are some people that would say a tax cut is not tax relief on the people. That's why. So at the end of the day, they're about to be done passing bills, and we can all take a giant sigh of relief because at least the bloodletting is over. These tax increases are over for the time, and we're still going to feel them, but at least they're done. People of Arkansas are going to be very thankful when the Arkansas legislative session is over because of what they've done to our pocketbooks. When it's all said and done, are the people of this state paying more money to the government? Are they paying the same amount of money to the government? Or are they paying less money to the government? If they're paying less, then congratulations, you've cut taxes. If they're paying the same, then you haven't cut taxes. And if they're paying more, then you've raised taxes. If they're paying more, then you've raised taxes. Think about that. Pretty frustrating. So we have this, I got this story here. Hang on one second. I got to pull this up. Did anybody see the Final Four over the weekend? You didn't see the Final Four? Yeah, so Texas Tech beats, so first of all, Auburn loses. You thought that, they were down like 10. They come back, they are up, and then Virginia ends up winning. And then, of course, Texas Tech, beats Michigan State, which a lot of people didn't see that coming. But did you see what happened, what CBS did? I found this one, this was very predictable. But my question is why? CBS cameras, Breitbart.com, Dylan Gwynn, CBS cameras cut away from the Texas Tech locker room the moment their head coach entered the room and began leading the team in prayer. The network seemed to have no problem letting their cameras linger. It was actually pretty boring at first. They just linger because they're waiting on the coach. They want to see the celebration. Go ahead and play this video. This is just brief coverage. It's a tweet from a guy named Eddie Brown. So the cameras are they got no problem. Go ahead and hit play. They got no problem letting the cameras linger, and they're just hanging out or whatever. No, and then go ahead and you can play the audio if you want. And they're all waiting. They're waiting and waiting and waiting. Where's the coach? Here's the coach. Coach comes in. Right? They're not celebrating. They're not jumping up and down. They're measured. They're excited. And now they go to take a knee to pray. And we don't want to see that, do we? No. Stop. So my question is why? Why? Now, it could be because the network is genuinely like, it's a personal moment. We don't want to broadcast that on TV. Or maybe it's just because people find the reflection on the events of the day, no matter how spectacular or how depressing, maybe it's because people find it just a little uncomfortable that you would believe in a higher power during all of that. I don't know. I think that we've gotten to a point where CBS finds it offensive. That's what I think. And there are plenty of people. Steve Deese, and I think I'm mispronouncing Steve's last name. I can never remember how he pronounces it because I just read. Anyway, CBS literally cuts away from Texas Tech locker room the minute the team starts a prayer after winning the Final Four, and then cut back as soon as they were done. I'm sure that was a coincidence. We have Bobby on Twitter. Thanks, CBS, for not showing the team prayer for Texas Tech. Poor class on your part. Believe it or not, there are a whole bunch of us believers of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Scrolling down. CBS had cameras in the Texas Tech dressing room awaiting a huge celebration. This is a guy by the name of Carlos Morales. They went away from it when they saw that the whole team and their staff were about to do was start their prayers. Did they feel they were about to offend their audience? Unbelievable. Another guy named P. CBS can't even show a prayer. And then he says, heathen expletive punks. Actually, we could probably heathen. That's an interesting description for what you think the mainstream media is, or at least the people who are controlling what they believe. You see, the folks on the coasts, I think, are offended by prayer, right? These are the same the folks, and that's where these media people are. That's where they live. That's where their headquarters are. They're on the coast. They're the coastal elites. They're the ones. Whenever this is the thing now. Whenever there's a tragedy, and somebody's like, man, I'm praying for that tragedy, or praying for my countrymen, or thoughts and prayers your way, the left mocks us. Like, they take your thoughts and prayers. What are they going to do? Support signing a piece of paper that will end access to guns, because that will change and perfect the human heart, and that will steer if we can only sign a piece of paper that says you can't have guns, that will somehow steer the human heart away from evil and taking the lives of others. Take your thoughts and prayers, and you know where you can stick them. That's what they're saying now. So is it any surprise that I mean, it's a very simple thing. I mean, but it says so much about. And again, these are also. I'm sorry. This is the same media complex that has disdain for flyover country and the people who voted for President Trump over Hillary Clinton. I mean, I'm telling you, and I've heard this said since 2009, 2010, that rural America is just looking so much different than these other parts of the country, the coastal elites, the urban areas. Because, at first it was just, well, they just have different needs, Urban environment's is going to want different things from Washington, D.C. than a rural community is going to want different things than Washington, D.C. That's the way it was for a very long time, and that's where you have the battle in Washington. Hey, but we can still work together and that sort of thing. No. Now we have different needs, but we have also completely different value systems, at least on the surface. And that's just becoming more and more apparent, But you've probably got your liberal leftist friend that would think that there's no there, that this isn't a big deal. That would still maybe be like, yeah, I don't really agree with that they would cut away from the prayer. That doesn't make any sense. But I still trust them to give me unbiased news about President Trump and everything that's going on in Washington, D.C. Well, maybe you should at least stop and rethink and just do a little logical thinking here. Or a little just do a little critical thinking. You see, they consider what they're doing is they are gatekeepers of information, and they understand that if they only allow certain bits of information to the populace, they can control how they perceive events and control what they think. So, if they're not going to let prayer, regardless of how a majority of Americans might feel about that, they're not going to let prayer on television. You think they're going to let, stuff on television that maybe makes you think, as a Donald Trump voter, for example, that you made the right decision? Just food for thought this morning on this Monday. We're going to reset. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. And good morning to you. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
It's that time. Welcome back to the program. Congressman Rick Crawford is on the phone. Rick, it's always great to have you, sir.
Hey, good to be with you.
Okay, so we have not have you on the program since we got this summary report from the Attorney General William Barr saying that the president's campaign did not collude with Russia. Now, I know as a member of the Intelligence Committee, Rick, this was no surprise to you, but feel free to react.
Well, look, Mueller came to the same conclusion that the House Intelligence and the Senate Intelligence Committees came to, and that was there was no evidence of collusion. It only took him 2 years and, upwards of $25 million, and however many FBI agents he had working and prosecutors and the whole nine, but came to the same conclusion.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, Loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
So Fayetteville, city of Fayetteville, they're going through a bond debate right now. They've got a special election. Can we talk about that just for a little bit? Why did the city of Fayetteville decide to run a bond issue? And the city has a whole wish list, by the way, of projects, $226 million worth. This is new debt. This is, I think I heard it, $2,700 per person living in the city of Fayetteville. Of course, they're not doing what the average person would do, but if the average person doesn't have money, the households typically, it would be thought of irresponsible for you to spend money if you don't really have money. Anyway, why a special election? Well, because they want the city. I want you to understand something. If we think that, do you think democracy is moral? Or is democracy the ethical thing to do or the right thing to do? I mean, a lot of people think that it is, right? It's democracy. This is the thing that both the left and right can say, listen, I understand democracy is technically socialism. It actually used to be synonymous with socialism. But if you're in a constitutional republic, right, you use the people's vote in order to elect representatives or to do something. But in terms of this bond issue, it's a straight democracy. You either want the bond issue, the more debt on every citizen of Fayetteville, or you don't, okay? Well, so let's just say it's the right thing to do. We believe giving the people a say is the right thing to do. There's some sort of moral standard to that or that sort of thing. But what if you intentionally hold the election where you know a drastic percentage, a drastic decrease, there will be a drastic decrease in the percentage of people that actually turn out and give their say, versus if you were to hold it in another time of year where everybody is engaged. People are looking at not only candidates, but they're looking at issues, and they go to the polls, and they express their view to their officials about how they wish to be governed, whether it's a bond issue, or whether it's a politician, whatever. So, if you choose the first option, you are, in my opinion, engaging in something that is wrong. That is black and white wrong. I think that you are trying to manipulate a system to where you can make sure you get what you want. And then you're claiming, you're also kind of lying, because you're claiming, if let's say the Fayetteville bond issue passes, yay, it passed, we win. The people have spoken, but not really, have they? The people didn't really speak the way they would have, where we could have gotten a larger amount of the population and then a more accurate. Special elections generate results that are less accurate in terms of what the people really want and how they really want to be ruled. Because people don't have time to vote on everything. That's why we have representatives, right? People are at work, people are trying to take care of their families, and yet cities and school districts plot to take more money from them when they're not looking.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
It's that time. Welcome back to the program. Congressman Rick Crawford is on the phone. Rick, it's always great to have you, sir.
Hey, good to be with you.
Okay, so we have not had have you on the program since we got this summary report from the Attorney General William Barr saying that the president's campaign did not collude with Russia. Now, I know as a member of the Intelligence Committee, Rick, this was no surprise to you, but feel free to react.
Well, look, Mueller came to the same conclusion that the House Intelligence and the Senate Intelligence Committees came to, and that was there was no evidence of collusion. It only took him 2 years and, upwards of $25 million, and however many FBI agents he had working and prosecutors and the whole nine, but came to the same conclusion. So, enough is enough, right? I mean, let's move on. But this is not about whether or not Russia or Trump colluded with the Russians. This is about what can we do to sustain this attack to carry us into the 2020 election cycle and have something to campaign on, because we all know they don't have anything to campaign on. So this is a concerted effort to keep this in the headline, and their willing partners in the media are going along with it, hook, line, and sinker. In fact, not only are they complicit, I mean, they're even unwilling to acknowledge that they got it wrong. I have yet to see anybody that's been on the wrong side of this issue in the media come out and say, "Yeah, we blew that call. Now let's move on to something else." And you know what the real problem with this is that we do know, and we knew this going in, that the Russians were involved in trying to influence our election, just like they do everywhere else, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the Balkans, Latin America. They're meddling in people's business all the time, and we're no exception. But because we've put so much emphasis on trying to prove this false narrative about the Trump campaign, that now we're behind the eight ball on actually preventing them from employing active measures in the 2020 election, because they just can't focus on anything else.
We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. I mean, yeah, this is just about they don't want to accept the outcome of the 2016 election still. This is now so personal. And, of course, Congressman Crawford, along with the William Barr letter, the revelations now, officially, Robert Mueller, no collusion, we now have this glaring witch hunt. If you look into the FISA abuse and the Department of Justice officials.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Gentlemen, welcome back to the program this Monday morning. Thank you again for starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. We got to have your help to do it. Now, some of you probably remember, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think some of you probably remember the debate over whether or not Brett Kavanaugh was fit to be on the Supreme Court. And that outraged a lot of people to see, what happened on the left, what the left did to Brett Kavanaugh's reputation, and how we completely threw out this idea that you are presumed innocent until you're proven guilty, and there's got to be proof, right? So just because somebody says something or makes an allegation, that doesn't mean anything unless we actually have proof. But, the left in this country, they wanted the ends justify the means. They just didn't like the fact that they weren't in control necessarily of who was going to sit on the Supreme Court next. At least that's the way it appears to me. But this idea, it's not something that is just come up overnight. The idea that you are not innocent, until proven guilty is something that's been, happened for a while now. Okay, this is kind of a growing epidemic in this country, and we actually have on the line somebody who has firsthand knowledge of this happening to one of her family members. I want to introduce you to Renee Jolly is on the line. Renee, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Paul. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And so I'd like for you to just tell your story. You're the parent of a son who was falsely accused by a female student. What tell us about that?
Right. So he was falsely accused and ultimately expelled for sexual assault. And my son's university is still under investigation by the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights for the way that they handled my son's case and his ultimate expulsion. But what we've learned in this experience is that, the school actually withheld evidence from his case in order to find him at fault on the university campus. And they also moved away from due process on the university campus for two reasons, really. The number one reason was, or the first reason was that in 2011, the Department of Education under the Obama administration sent out a Dear Colleague letter to the institutions of university institutions across the United States, stating if they did not clamp down hard on sexual assault allegations, they ran the risk of, or so they thought, of losing federal funding. So there was intense pressure on universities, including my son's, to show that they indeed were taking these accusations seriously, even if it meant wrongly expelling an innocent student, which in my son's case, based on the evidence that was discovered, they did. And then the second thing that they did was what you were alluding to with start by believing, that they use techniques to start by believing the accuser, but when you do that, you in effect are presuming guilt on the accused. And so you get these investigators, and these were campus student conduct investigators, who developed a belief early on that my son was guilty. And so when you have that mindset, you're far more likely to look for anything that assumes their guilt and confirms that preconception, rather than looking at evidence that counters that belief.
Yeah, so instead of start by believing, maybe you just should start by listening, and then you should move on to the investigation phase after that, right, Renee?
Absolutely, yes. There's he said, there's this he said, she said, but you have to look at the evidence, what the evidence shows. And in my son's case, there was very, very specific evidence, including eyewitness statements from even the girl who accused my son, from her friends, who cleared my son's side of the story, or corroborated his side of the story. Yet the school chose to leave that off of the final investigation report, again, because of the pressures they were under by the Obama administration, and the fact that their training really ensued on this start by believing. And start by believing really is a mission. It's a global campaign described as, on their website, as transforming the way we respond to sexual assault. And it's well-funded to the tune of $9 million over the past 8 years by the Department of Justice. And it's under the umbrella of End Violence Against Women International, which is a laudable cause to end violence against women, because for too many years the pendulum had swung over to where women did not feel that they were being adequately believed, and their claims were not being investigated. But the problem is, we've now swung the pendulum the other way, but you can't really fix one problem by creating another, and that's exactly what we've done.
Well, I guess I wonder, because it just dawned on me, it's an odd campaign titled "Start by Believing." So, if women tended to not be believed, I'm curious as to why. I mean, I don't think necessarily. I think stereotypes exist, for example, because a lot of times they're reinforced every day, and that doesn't mean you need to interact with people based on that, because that's wrong. But people have ideas of notions. So there are false claims out there, right? I mean, that's the only reason why you would have to have a campaign about, sexual assault against women called Start by Believing. If there are people that don't believe it, it may be because there's a lot of instances where someone is claiming sexual assault that it didn't actually happen. Now, I mean, I don't mean that to be offensive, but that's just logically where, what do you say to that, Renee?
Yeah, I completely agree, because why should we believe women any more than we should believe any man? It's, it's an outgrowth of Me Too. This movement says we must first believe all women's allegations of sexual harassment, but then we forget about the presumption of innocence, or the possibility she could be unbelievable once the evidence was reviewed. So Start by Believing is scary. It's really moving us away from our constitutional protections of presumption of innocence. It's leading to very biased investigations, and it's convicting innocent people, because this campaign is not only being rolled across the university campuses, it's also being rolled out to criminal justice professionals across the United States. But yet there's been quite a bit of backlash from criticisms to this type of training. From the U.S. Air Force is denouncing this type of training, saying that it's it's not a good or fair method. It's being denounced by the Governor's Commission in Arizona, stating the same, that they do not want it rolled out across their state. So it's scary, but yet people are jumping on the training that is available, and it's not good for our country, and it's not good for the rights that we have constitutionally protected.
So the left is putting this out. You got to believe women. Now, I will tell you this: that you can believe men, but only if you are Jussie Smollett and you're a gay black guy at 3 a.m. Then you will be believed for a time, at least, until the scam kind of just is exposed to everybody. But we're talking with Renee Jolly again. Her son was wrongly accused and then kicked out of school. I got this written here, Renee. A national survey found that 1 in 10 persons reported they had been falsely accused of sexual assault, domestic violence, or child abuse. Then 2,382 exonerations have been documented to date, representing nearly 21,000 person years lost. False accusations and perjury are a leading contributor to wrongful convictions. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so those are accurate numbers, and the first thing that comes to mind when those are read is just how sad it is that these people have lost so much of their freedom and their protections, and that's really, again, a testament to why it's so important to have unbiased, thorough, and fair investigations, that police detectives take an oath, and they're expected to conduct investigations like that. And they're based on principles of honesty and impartiality, but when you move away from that type of fairness, you are going to be taking away a lot of life from these people, and it's wrong, and it needs to be stopped.
You mentioned earlier, or I think you mentioned earlier, $1.4 million right now the U.S. Department of Justice is sending to this Start by Believing campaign. Is that right?
Yes, that was actually just in the past year or so.
Wow.
Since 2011, it's been nearly $9 million. And we've gone against their and sent letters to the Attorney General, William Barr, asking him to stop the funding for these sham Start by Believing trainings. Because it's under the umbrella of End Violence Against Women, and the Department of Justice is a vast department. We are trying to bring awareness to him on really what they're funding, because he may not have any specific idea on what is being rolled out.
Gosh.
And their training material, it's online. It's available for anybody to see. And it tells in the training material, it tells the participants to conceal inconsistencies in the complainant statement to minimize the risk of contradiction. It tells them to make sure the sexual encounter does not look like a consensual sexual experience. It tells them to slant the investigation report to focus on evidence that serves to corroborate the victim's account. And, your listeners are welcome to go on a website to view this, and that would be going to saveservices.org. That's Save Stop Abusive and Violent Environment, services.org. And they can read this, and they can also click on a link to sign a petition to support stopping this type of training.
I think they definitely need to, Renee, and it's strange. I guess last question, it is strange to me. You know, you're on this program standing up for fairness and standing up for due process when it comes to, you know, trying to determine whether or not a crime has been committed. And isn't that odd? I mean, what does that say? What do you think the end game is? Because obviously this is about an agenda. You don't try to change this concept, this sacred concept of, you know, that you're innocent until proven guilty, unless there's some sort of end game, in my opinion. I mean, I know it's a speculative question, but what do you think about that?
You know, I scratch my head as well. Why, as a country, we have moved away from the tenets of constitutional protections. You know, we are calling people victims or before they've even been proven to become a victim. And, you know, whether someone's a victim is a conclusion to be made at the end of a fair process, at the end of an investigative process. It's not an assumption made at the beginning, but yet that's exactly what we're doing. And you know, what we see happening in the media right now with Joe Biden. You know, he's basically living in the world that he helped create around what is sexual harassment or what is consent. And, you know, that's a whole other show for you.
No, it really is. And I think the difference is, I mean, if there were videos of, like, Brett Kavanaugh making little girls extremely uncomfortable, you actually had evidence. I mean, here the thing with Joe Biden is, yeah, he's living in a world that he created, but there's also video evidence that just makes, I think, a lot of people very uncomfortable.
Right.
Oh, but anyway, okay. Well, Renee Jolly, I appreciate it. I'm so sorry what happened to your son, and I wish you guys the best, and thank you for, you know, using what's obviously something that's negative in your life to try to change it, to make it positive in the end, and make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you for having me
on
this morning.
Renee Jolly, everybody. Fantastic interview there. Again, she's mother of an accused student. Falsely accused, then he was kicked out of school. Now, of course, that's all tied up there. But man, I didn't realize $1.4 million right now of your taxpayer dollars are going to train folks on how they should believe women just because they're women. That's in the Department of Justice. That's not the point of a criminal justice system. It's maddening is what it is. We're going to take a break. Going to reset the phone number, call or text 870-275-9799. Also over at facebook.com/Conduit News. Sound off. Tell me what you think. We'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Who were at the very top under Obama, it looks like to me that they were abusing their authority and maybe acted in illegal ways. And so now the question is, will there be investigations? Will the FISA documents be released? Will we make sure this never happens again, as President has said, to another president of the United States? What are your thoughts?
Well, let's hope so, because you're absolutely right. What we uncovered as a result of this Russia investigation are things that the Democrats in Washington don't want to talk about. And that is the fact that the Obama administration played a role in initiating this intelligence investigation against then candidate Trump, and kept it going as he became president-elect and ultimately president. So, think about that, a counterintelligence investigation. So it wasn't a criminal investigation, because that has a different threshold.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so next hour we got a lot of news to get to, just some developments, some analysis. We're also going to get to some video of Senator Jonathan Dismang on Friday in the Senate Revenue and Tax Committee, where he blasted Governor Hutchinson's Department of Finance and Administration, saying that, essentially insinuating that the Department of Finance Administration has abused the trust that the legislators have put in the agency so many times. He said he's done with them claiming bills are technical corrections when in fact they are policy decisions, policy changes. He says that's not right. He says Jonathan Dismang on Friday told the DFNA's Paul Gehring that when you tell us it's technical corrections, that's a code word that puts all legislators at ease. But in reality, we're changing policies in a significant way, and that's not right. I was very, it was very interesting. Certainly, you don't see that very often, Now, I will tell you this. From a taxpayer standpoint, I don't think it accomplishes much. The fact of the matter is, DFNA's financial impact statement, in my opinion, from just from what they've said on record when it comes to the internet sales tax, is wrong. You let a conservative piece of legislation go through a committee, and they've got a phony DFNA statement the way that the internet sales tax did, it would never go anywhere. But because it's approved by the governor and the establishment, it sails through committees, and you can't say anything. The bill's own sponsor, or the guy who ran the bill in the House, Dan Douglas, he said that DFNA's numbers were a, quote, wag. Quote, he said this on the floor, a wild-ass guess. Now think about that for a second. Think about that. The governor's Department of Finance and Administration is described as just guessing out of thin air about what the revenue impact on Arkansans are going to be, and the House of Representatives passes it. This is why we need people with principles down there. It's not that you can be somebody who has principles and still vote for a tax increase, and I'll disagree with you. But it would be nice if we just had common sense fiscal responsibility principles, maybe you support a tax increase, but don't you want DF&A to actually do their job? If you're supposed to have this, DF&A, you got to have, if you want to do anything in this state legislatively, you got to have a permission slip from DF&A. Last week they seriously hurt the taxpayer of the state of Arkansas. The Department of Finance and Administration, unfortunately, in terms of scoring legislation this session, they have certainly exposed themselves as not being this unbiased, the numbers don't lie organization. Instead, they've now become a political arm of the governor's office. It's quite sad. Just to give you a recap, last week the Department of Finance and Administration was called out for low estimates. They told the committee their own numbers, and then they said their own numbers shouldn't be trusted. I'm not making that up. That's what happened in the House Revenue and Tax Committee last week. The Department of Finance and Administration tell the committee their own numbers, when you add it up, should not be trusted. Wednesday, the next day on Wednesday, they had a bill that failed on the House floor, which would have allowed DF&A to hire third-party collectors so that they could harass people to go after back taxes. On Thursday, their estimates were called a, quote, wild-ass guess by the bill's sponsor, the internet sales tax sponsor. And on that same day, the collectors agency, the third-party collectors that they wanted to hire to harass Arkansans even more, was killed again. And then Friday, Senator Jonathan Dismang essentially called them fictional, misleading. There was one state representative, Les Warren, who, quote, testified against, end quote, DF&A as an entity itself. I mean, I've got to testify against DF&A. Pretty interesting. I mean, it's still... taxpayers are still, left paying more money to the government, but it was fascinating to watch. And again, we'll have that video for you later in the program, and I'll tell you exactly why this happened. It had to do with Arkansas trust laws versus the federal government's trust laws when it comes to how you tax them, how you tax trusts here. Congressman Bruce Westerman is in the news. So I hear he's been mentioned on Fox News a few times. I think he was interviewed on Fox Business. Westerman is the author of the Fair Care Act. It's H.R. 1332. The title, Private Sector Health Insurance Reforms. And if you go to, I guess, is this his website? Yeah. You get a little summary of what this all will do. It's pretty detailed summary, but Congressman Bruce Westerman, it seems to be this bill here is getting a lot of feedback from really everybody, and he I guess he did this Fox News or Fox Business hit where he talked about how he hopes to talk to the president about this. So anyway, this is at least an attempt. When people say the Republican Party, they don't want to replace anything. They just want to get rid of everything. Have you seen the polls? Like only 14% of those surveyed in this one poll I saw think their health care got better when Obamacare passed. In the grand scheme of things, well, no, yeah, of course, that's what happened. See, I mean, the media may not want to represent it, but Obamacare was a disaster, and if the Democrat Party had maintained power and Hillary Clinton would have won, they would have used the fact that it was a disaster because it was designed to cripple our health care system. It was designed to say, well, we tried that. We've got to go full socialist on them. That's what Obamacare was designed to do. It was a step to try to uproot, these traditional way of doing business. Not that we didn't need reforms before, but it was really an attempt to, I think, bankrupt the private sector, get the private sector even more addicted to federal money than they already were, or government intervening in their business. And then it was like, well, you know what? We'll just take these insurance companies' executives. We'll take care of them so they don't complain that this is socialism and not capitalism. And we'll go ahead and move them into the National Organization of Health. And then we'll have a Medicare for all single-payer system. If Hillary Clinton were president, that's where we would be going. Full steam ahead. And they would say, we've got to do something because Obamacare, didn't work the way we thought it would. And now Obamacare's not working, it's worse, but they certainly don't want any free market reforms. That's true. Anyway, Congressman Bruce Westerman, I'm sure we'll be talking to him, and actually we have him on the schedule in a couple of weeks, and so we'll be talking to him about this new piece of legislation.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
To implement and all this other kind of stuff. So they went the counterintelligence route because it gave them far more wiggle room in terms of how do they get the authority to do it and who are they going to investigate and all this other kind of stuff. Well, that's how FISA came into the picture, and they manipulated FISA, and I'm going to say probably out and out lied to FISA judges. And the only other explanation you'd have is that the FISA judges were somehow involved. And I don't want to think that happened. I think that what more than likely happened, and I think the evidence suggests this, is that they manipulated evidence in order to be able to go in there and present the case for the request for a FISA warrant. And see, those have to be renewed periodically, and they kept going in and renewing those FISA warrant applications so they could continue that surveillance on U.S. citizens, by the way. And so this was all done because, number one, they needed to prevent him getting the nomination. Then they find out, okay, well, heck, he's got the nomination. We got to do everything we can to prevent him from winning the election. Oh, heck, he won? Oh, no. Now we got to do everything we can to prevent him from being inaugurated. We've got to work really, really fast here because we only got a couple of months. We've got to bring this stuff out and show what a bad guy he is, and he's involved with the Russians. Otherwise, he's going to be inaugurated and sworn in as president. Oh, wait, he got sworn in? Oh, heck. Now we've got to ramp it up even more because we've got to work on building the case for impeachment. So this got progressively worse. And what this all comes down to is the further along they went, the more necessary it became for them to cover their tracks, because this was no doubt a Hillary initiated endeavor with, obviously, the support of Obama administration officials. And now we've got to create a great big smoke screen and cover our tracks. Otherwise, we're going to be in deep trouble. And so at the heart of this, quite frankly, James Comey, Andy McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, and you can see this vast incestuous relationship that existed among the FBI, DOJ, and Nellie Orr having worked for the CIA, Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, Christopher Steele, all these critical players in this huge, huge conspiracy to undermine the Trump campaign, the Trump transition team, and ultimately the Trump administration. And they have not been willing to come clean about it. Comey, and I have said on your program as far back as the 2016 election, when I was saying, hold on, give him the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
If you recall, we had this conversation about when he said, in this environment, pursuing prosecution of Hillary wouldn't be indicated. Well, I'm not sure what he was saying. I said that to you then. I'm not sure what he's saying, but he could be making the statement that, look, it's never going to stand in this administration, so there's no point in pursuing that. Okay, I'm willing to understand that perspective, but why'd you come out and say it? And then why did you come out and then reinitiate the investigation? And I think there were some things there that they were trying to do to ensure that their tracks were covered if, in fact, it was found out that they were doing these kinds of things. Comey's not a good guy. And so I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I think we probably ought to always do that on the front end. But it has since come out that he is somebody that is only interested in his own advancement and his own personal aggrandizement. Same thing with Andy McCabe, who was neck deep in it, and his wife was receiving campaign money from the Clinton campaign and others as she was running for state senate. And you can just see this network of Obama and Clinton operatives working at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and the FBI. And so far, they haven't been held to account. They have skated, so much so that Comey's out there pushing a book, McCabe's out there pushing a book, You know what? They need to, because their legal fees are going to be really, really extraordinary, and they're going to have to pay for them somehow. So they might as well try with a book. But the other one that needs to be thinking about it is John Brennan, who lied to our committee. He's lied before Congress. He's been out there on television, on national television, repeatedly pushing this false narrative. Now, he came back and said, I got bad information. I got bad intelligence. Wait a minute. You're the CIA director. And you're going to sit here and an analyst, by the way, who really had no credentials to be the CIA director, but because of a core, he was about to get fired at the CIA, and then he ended up.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
About the only thing controversial that might be left this week. Welcome back to the program. Hour number 2, by the way. Thanks so much for being with us today. About the only thing, this is the end of the 92nd General Assembly. It started back on January the 14th. January 4th. Think about that for a second. It's now April the 8th. It's almost tax day, by the way. You need to be thinking about that. If you haven't filed your taxes yet, it's coming up. I just want you to think. There's a lot of you guys filing taxes right now, and if anything, this is the day where we are numb to taxes. Isn't it? I hear the Trump tax cuts are actually great. I hear they're going to benefit a lot of people, but it's still painful to pay taxes. We know this, and I think one thing that needs to be said about what's happened in the 92nd General Assembly to date, and again, it's supposed to end on Wednesday. There wasn't anything done to help Arkansas or to put Arkansas in line with the one thing that the Trump tax cuts did is they said that you can't write off your state taxes on your federal taxes. If you really want to think about it, there wasn't anything done to try to offset that impact to Arkansans, and it's because we don't have any money to do it. That's the one thing that the liberal states couldn't stand. The liberal states couldn't stand the fact, remember this, that the Trump tax cuts essentially eliminated the exemption or the deduction of what you pay in state taxes towards your federal taxes. And it was a really genius move because what it meant was that these liberal states that have really, really high taxes might actually start to realize that they themselves are taxed too much. And maybe there would be some movement for the state of California or the state of New York to give people back more of their money. Of course, the politicians locally in New York and California, they're not willing to have any bit of self-reflection. Instead, they're just mad that the Trump administration is taxing liberals more. And that's what happens, right? But then you take a state like Arkansas that has one of the highest tax burdens in the nation, one of the highest tax burdens of all the states that surround us, and our politicians, they weren't able to cut our tax, certainly not cut our taxes immediately. And I just find that really frustrating. It's the last thing that really makes Arkansas stand out. Right now, our tax burden is so high. here in the state of Arkansas, and we've now raised the gas tax. We want to keep a half-cent sales tax that's set to expire. We're raising your cell phone taxes. We're raiding the property tax relief trust fund to put it in. Well, at first the general fund, but now the long-term reserve fund, which is actually a fund that's been renamed that, and that's another topic. But the people realize that Arkansas, according to that USA Today article, we're the 17th worst place to live in terms of tax policy, and we're 44th in per capita income. I think those two figures are statistically relevant. If you actually look at where we rank on that list, Arkansas is an average blue state, meaning our current tax burden is constantly reminding us that we were a democratically controlled state for 138 years legislatively, nonstop legislatively. No Republicans since Reconstruction until the majorities were gained in 2012. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. State of Arkansas, as I've said this many times before, voters have been flocking to polls, voting for Republicans in droves because we agree with their platform, we agree with their ideas of leaving more money into the pockets of Arkansans. And we've now been doing it for almost 10 years. It's almost a decade. And it's good that we lowered the income tax. Asa Hutchinson is right to have lowered the income tax 2 years from now from 6.9 to 5.9%. But along those same lines, if we're going to call what's good, we also have to call what's bad. It's bad to create a new tax to get around the Constitution, to tax the same product twice so your prices at the pump and go up 3 cents and 6 cents respectively for gas or diesel. It's wrong when we've already voted on a tax increase, a half-cent sales tax increase in 2012 that's set to expire in 2022. It's wrong for a future legislature to go back against the will of the people and put on the ballot to make sure that we want the tax to stay. Are you sure you want the tax to sunset? That's not right. That's more money from us. It's also wrong generally to claim that you're cutting taxes on Arkansans and giving them net tax relief when you're raising taxes in other places. The bottom line is this. The reason Arkansas didn't fix this increase in tax burden there's just one little increase in tax burden from the Trump tax cuts. I think it's generally going to be a wash, but it could have been more. When you look at the state and local deduction, that's what I'm talking about. The state and local deductions, right? It could have been more. Well, we don't have the money, though. Arkansas, obviously, if you're raising taxes on people's cell phone bills to pay for counties' 911 systems, if you're raising taxes on their internet purchases, if you're raising taxes on all their purchases by not allowing a tax to sunset, and go, there's more I'm leaving out right now because it's if you're refusing to pass the increase in the deduction for sales tax on used cars from $4,000 to $7,500 after a car at that point has been taxed 2 or 3 times since then, or maybe more, to help out people who are looking to get a car to drive to work but don't want to pay a sales tax. You're refusing to do that, folks. We don't have money. I'm telling you, I believe we are in a budget crisis. We are running out of other people's money. Something Margaret Thatcher described as socialism. I've been doing this. We've been covering this since January, beginning of January. Everybody's been gearing up. In terms of just personally, I'll just let you know something. It's like a time warp. I'm just going to be honest. I cannot believe it's spring. I can't believe it's April. I can't believe it's almost the middle of April. The end of this week, it's the middle of April. So, imagine if you're me. I started traveling down to Little Rock on a weekly basis, 3 days, And started that in January, and now it's like you wake up and it's like, what? Wait a second, it's over, and it's now April. It flew by. Absolutely, it's like stepping into a time machine for me. It really did. It's just kind of even hard to get my bearings. I just can't believe that the year, the quarter. I mean, 25% of the year is gone. So strange to me. So weird. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you would like to contribute to the conversation, you can call or text. You can also sound off over at Facebook.com/Conduit News. Kind of recapping once again what happened last week. Last week, if you're wanting to know what happened to the vape tax bill, there was an attempt to tax your vape. If that's what you do. Also, there was an attempt to tax your cigarettes, $100 million more. And then there was an attempt by, again, this is Governor's nephew, Jim Hendren, to put an earned income tax credit, to create an earned income tax credit for the poor, which is a welfare program. And this was very controversial, but it got out of the Senate because that's what he wanted. He wanted it out, so it got out. And then it went to the House committee where it didn't have the votes. And from what I can tell, according to my sources, there was a little bit of contention about Senator Jim Hendren's clout with a House Revenue and Tax Committee. Just what I can tell. And the senator then amended his bill to take out tobacco altogether because it was too controversial. Then he took out the EITC because it was too controversial, because it was a redistribution of welfare program from a Republican that was supported by all the Democrats. There was this press conference where Hendren was flanked by Democrats, and the Democrat Party of Arkansas put the picture up on their website to celebrate earned income tax credit, their signature policy goal for the last couple of years, and now the Republican governor's nephew, Republican Jim Hendren, was going to give it to them. And then all of a sudden, once I did a show on it and got it out there, guess what? They pulled their article. The Democrats pulled their article down and just, well, I got no response. I tried to reach out to him, just no response because it was awkward. I don't know if they were told to pull it down, or I don't know if they made a political calculation, the Democrats saying, well, we don't need the Republicans to revolt here. We need them to think. We need Jim to continue. We need to give Jim some cover. So let's not publicize this. Let's be a little bit more strategic. I mean, that's what I would have done. I could, if you were really trying to get the end result, which the Democrats are, they believe in the policy. So they pull the press down. They pull the press release down because they don't want it to be used. I get that. By the way, it's all of it's archived on the conduitnews.com, though. I mean, we've got the image, we've got the article, we did a whole show on it, and that's why we do video, and that's why we put articles up on our screens for those of you watching the program as well. So the EITC bill is dead, though. Jim Hendren then amended it and brought the 67% vaping tax down to 47, and then 47 down to 30. Tried to get support in the committee. I think he amended it so much, and it was so late in the session, and Senator Hendren just wanted to get the bill out no matter what. I think Joe Jett, from what I can tell, State Representative Joe Jett single-handedly has killed Jim Hendren's earned income tax credit, vape tax, tobacco tax bill. Because Joe Jett said on Thursday that he canceled the meeting and said there will be no more rev and tax meetings. Now that's subject to change. You never know. They might meet on Tuesday, but they didn't meet on Thursday, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. Session's not over yet. They could still meet tomorrow, but I think I'm telling you, I think State Representative Joe Jett, he may have just saved people a lot of money. He might have just saved an entire blooming industry, the vaping industry in the state of Arkansas. I'm serious. These vape shops that employ people, not the ones that are selling the Juul, the popular one, the one that's owned by tobacco companies. I'm talking about the vape shops that have successfully allowed people or helped people, aided people to stop smoking combustible cigarettes. I'm talking about those. Joe Jett, State Representative Joe Jett. I don't agree with him on a lot of issues, but we can agree where we agree. I think he may have, by canceling that last committee meeting and killing Jim Hendren's bill, I think he may have single-handedly saved the vaping industry a 30% tax, a 40% tax, or a 60% tax. Gene on Facebook writes, the dogs are refusing to eat the dog food. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Because who goes right alongside this? Joe Jett killing Jim Hendren's EITC bill is the same as, in a way, Jonathan Dismang on Friday absolutely obliterated and called out the Department of Finance and Administration for misleading committees. He did. We've got the video and audio. We're going to play it for you at the bottom of this hour, and you need to see it. DFNA's caught with their hand in the cookie jar. They are. If you don't know what happened Friday, just listen to this. Because essentially, it wasn't a good week for DFNA. But on Friday, Jonathan Dismang blasted DFNA for them, for basically the Arkansas legislature. They trust them. They do whatever they want, but they're being misled with stuff. And people are now looking at, fiscal impacts, researching them. And, Jonathan Dismang called them out on Friday and exposed them. Okay? Jonathan Dismang on Friday said that they're trying to negatively impact taxpayers. That DFNA is trying to negatively impact taxpayers' potential litigation against the state, because DFNA, and when it comes to taxing trusts, apparently have been taxing trusts without the statutory authority to tax them. So for 20 years now, DFNA has been taxing trusts with just a rulemaking authority. So they come up with this bill that's just a technical correction. Only problem is people started looking at it and they started saying, hang on, wait a second. DFNA's been operating, from what I can tell, I think DFNA has been operating outside of the law and taking a lot of money from people who have paid this tax because DFNA said so. Well, so DFNA originally supported a bill to just take Arkansas trust tax laws and put them in line with the federal tax laws, because that's the rule they were enforcing anyway. Well, then somebody amended it. Les Warren amended the bill to state that DFNA never had the authority before now to do this, and DFNA did not like that. So they added, at the last minute, a new fiscal impact statement that told the committee that if they passed this, it could be it would mean a $20 million hit to the budget. In reality, it could mean a $20 million hit to the budget if people came back and amended their returns within the statute of limitations, which would mean they would be entitled to have that money back. Okay? So if it'd be a $20 million hit to the budget if people came back and amended returns if they told people they never had the authority. So possibly up to $20 million could go back to the taxpayer. Senator Jonathan Dismang called that out for being fiction, but then agreed to amend out the language. Larry Teague was also adamant they didn't have $20 million to possibly lose and were spending all they could. Again, I've got the video for you, but you've just got to see this. Now, does it matter? Well, Arkansans, I mean, it's all well and good to be upset with DFNA after they misled both committees, both Senate Rev and Tax committees on the internet sales tax. It's okay now, we can be upset about it. That, to me, is wildly frustrating, because the time to call out DFNA is when they were trying to pass an internet sales tax with a financial impact statement that was for a different bill, a different piece of legislation. I mean, it's a kangaroo court down there, folks. It really is. It's just, it's whatever leadership wants, and eventually they'll just give you the arguments. They're phony arguments. They're carefully crafted. Oh, by the way, they kept... we'll have to get to this, but the funniest part to me was DFNA's Paul Gehring is at the end of the table, and Jonathan Dismang is like, you call this technical corrections, but you're really changing policy. And then Paul Gehring is like, well, we can call it something else. From now on, we can amend our terminology. We can amend our language. And I'm thinking, yeah, you carefully craft that language, don't you? You carefully crafted language. Maybe Senator Jonathan Dismang on Friday kind of became a convert to the idea of carefully crafted language and how it negatively affects the people because it keeps the people in the dark, but carefully crafted language also keeps the legislature in the dark. And that's more of the point. Back in a moment.
Buddying up with George Tenet and ended up working in the White House and became the CIA director. This guy was a former communist, had no business running the CIA. But be that as it may, he's going to stand there as the former CIA director and claim he got bad intelligence? You got to be kidding me. This is what we're up against.
You're right. I really appreciate this. Is an incredible amount of information. We're talking with Arkansas Congressman Rick Crawford. He's on the House Intel Committee. We've talked before about releasing the FISA document so the American people can see everything. I think it's clear now the president didn't declassify because his attorney said they'll be able to get you on the obstruction charge, or at least you'll help Mueller's case, trying to charge you with obstruction of justice. And so he waited till the Mueller report came out. No Russia collusion. Okay, but now we don't know when it'll be released. We have foreign governments like the United Kingdom that don't want it released. And I can you speak to that, Rick?
Let's face it, times are tough for the Arkansas General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Joe Biden. Joe. They're making fun of him on SNL now. Not that anyone really watches SNL. I watch SNL not live, but, on YouTube, just so I can keep up with what's going on culturally. But, Joe, you were saying that you saw a really good meme with Joe Biden reading the TSA, is it the TSA handbook or how to become a TSA agent? So, like, Joe Biden, it's like, well, how do I become a TSA agent? When you get to stick the hands down the pants, check for bombs. Oh, man, that's pretty funny. Yeah. Joe Biden, excuse me, ma'am, step over here. I need to pat you down. Democrats. What's funny is like Brett Kavanaugh, he's a sex offender. No evidence, no actual evidence of him doing these things. Joe Biden, Let's just say he makes women and kids uncomfortable. Let's just say that's the allegation. That's not necessarily a crime, but he makes them uncomfortable. There's actual evidence of this everywhere. There are so many videos of this man clearly making people uncomfortable by invading their personal space, grabbing little girls by the arms, not letting them move when they clearly want to. If you had video evidence of Brett Kavanaugh doing that, it would have been over. Endgame. Double standards. They're everywhere on the left. Back in a minute.
Buddying up with George Tenet and ended up working in the White House and became the CIA director. This guy was a former communist, had no business running the CIA. But be that as it may, he's going to stand there as the former CIA director and claim he got bad intelligence? You got to be kidding me. This is what we're up against.
You're right. I really appreciate this. Is an incredible amount of information. We're talking with Arkansas Congressman Rick Crawford. He's on the House Intel Committee. We've talked before about releasing the FISA documents so the American people can see everything. I think it's clear now the president didn't declassify because his attorney said they'll be able to get you on the obstruction charge, or at least you'll help Mueller's case. Trying to charge you with obstruction of justice. And so he waited till the Mueller report came out. No Russia collusion. Okay. But now, we don't know when it'll be released. We have foreign governments like the United Kingdom that don't want it released. And I can you speak to that, Rick? Why do some of our allies not want these FISA documents released?
Well, as you can see through, open source reporting, media reports and so on, nothing classified here. Christopher Steele was a former MI6 operative. He had been contracted by the FBI before viewed as a credible source. He's British. I think it's possible that they just don't want the embarrassment or the potential of, and then of course there's also a nexus there with George Papadopoulos and his meeting with an Australian in London, who is I'm not sure what his role was working out of the Australian embassy in London, but that was sort of a backdoor into, they had information supposedly that they were going to share. I mean, I think there are probably there's the potential to create some embarrassment, and this is open source stuff that you can piece together if you read enough of the information. You can piece this together on your own, and so I'm not revealing anything that's not already out there in the media, and I'm not confirming anything that hasn't already been confirmed multiple times through the George Papadopoulos indictment and throughout that process. So this is stuff that's all out there, has been reported by multiple sources multiple times. It's just that probably in this condensed, consolidated conversation we're having here, you're starting to see some things now come to a little more present a little more clarity with regard to that issue. But there, I'm not saying that there's anything untoward involving either of those important, critical allies. I'm saying that there might be, just like in our case, a bad actor or two, that it might be embarrassing and reflect poorly.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All we want is transparency. I mean, that's all we want in all levels of government. I mean, speaking of transparency, if you have not listened to Congressman Rick Crawford, who was on this program on Friday, talk about the Department of Justice bad actors. He listed them from James Comey to Andrew McCabe. He goes down the list. This is Arkansas's own Congressman Rick Crawford. He is on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He knows things that he cannot say, okay? Now, you need to go listen to this interview. It's up right now at conduitnews.com. It's the first video that you see, if you scroll down to the middle of the page. U.S. Congressman Rick Crawford details DOJ bad actors. it's a fascinating interview, and it's, you know, it was because of Congressman Crawford that Devin Nunes, the former chairman, the ranking member now as the Democrats have control, Devin Nunes, Republican, was in Arkansas last year. He set up the interview where he could interview Congressman Nunes, and so that was really great. But, you know, I've been following, just like everybody else. You know, we talk about the local issues here, but I'm following what goes on in Washington, D.C. We need transparency. We got to figure out what exactly happened. This whole Russia collusion concept was a cover-up for what they actually did to the president's campaign before and after he won election. And that's going to become clear, I believe. But you need to listen. You need to go listen to this interview. It's up on YouTube. You can subscribe to the Conduit News YouTube channel. Click subscribe. Click the little bell to receive notifications. If you want an Arkansas take on what's going on in Washington, D.C. concerning James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, all these guys who are involved in this coup attempt, because they did not like that you voted for Donald Trump and that Hillary Clinton lost, check it out. It's up right now at conduitnews.com. Rick Crawford's interview that we did on Friday, if you missed it. All right, folks, let's talk about trusts. Arkansas has been taxing trusts without the authority to do so. That, to me, is huge news. They've been attacked. And so they come up with a bill. Department of Finance and Administration, they come up with their own bill, in an attempt to fix this, to adopt the federal trust laws finally, so that DFNA can actually, I believe, legally tax trusts the way they're supposed to be taxed. And then people start looking into it, and State Representative Les Warren amends it, and then DFNA doesn't support their own bill. Now, why is that? Why would DFNA not support their own bill? And DFNA, in not supporting their own bill, at the last minute says that if you pass their own bill that's now been amended, it'll cost the state $20 million. Here's State Senator Larry Teague quoting from the DFNA statement, asking Les Warren, did you know this? Listen. This is on Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Warren, this shows a $20 million impact to revenue. You realize that in the revenue stabilization that's finished, that there's not $20 million.
I understand that. And that was just a figure that was just given to me a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. That's how things work down there.
My question is, we've got 47 other states that have done this. Trusts are a very significant planning mechanism for financial planning. They have been for years. This is not something new that people are starting to undertake. It has been done for years. So my concern, and I guess my surprise, is that this was not already law.
Yet DFNA was acting like it was.
Something this significant should not just be referenced by the Department of Finance and Administration. This should be law for the state of Arkansas, enacted by the state legislature.
All right, stop.
I'm not arguing that issue with you. What I'm arguing
hang on, keep going. I want to hear what Teague says.
Is that it's $20 million I don't have.
And I guess I would like to see how they're coming up with their $20 million
Stop.
hit.
I tell you, all right, go ahead and get the next cut up. Next up is Paul Gehring. They're talking about $20 million here. I'll tell you exactly why. Because it's potential litigation or even pending cases. When people start to find out that they can go back and amend their tax returns, and they were not supposed to pay this trust tax to DFNA because it's not Arkansas code. They were just referencing, well, the federal government says that we can, that they tax it like this, so that's how we're going to tax it. That may not fly, and DFNA knows that, and they don't want the taxpayers to know it, and so that's now why they oppose their own bill, because there was language in there that said that the legislative finding and intent was, finding that DFNA doesn't have the authority to do what they've been doing. And DFNA is like, whoa, we do have the authority. We don't want to get sued. Whoa. We're a bureaucracy. We have the authority to just make the rule and make you do it. I don't think they do. Here's DFNA's Paul Gehring. This guy is used a lot. A lot of people use Paul Gehring to come to the end of the table to justify growing government. That's what I can see. Here's DFNA's Paul Gehring.
New code sections. We shouldn't be one of these states that has not yet adopted 671 through 679. The problem is if we put into our tax law in do not codify language that a rule that we adopted 22 years ago that we have had all of these years of returns filed by taxpayers that have complied with the requirements of that rule, if we pass a law that says that DFA director never had the authority to promulgate that rule in the first place, we're going to subject the state to taxpayers being able to amend returns that are currently available to be amended under the statute of limitations to state that this income of this grantor trust was never taxable in the state of Arkansas. And in doing so, we can subject ourselves to at least a $20 million fiscal impact because we would have 3 years that would be available to be subject to an amendment. We entirely agree with the adoption of 671 through 679 for tax years 2020 and following. But we have serious problems if you're going to adopt a law by the General Assembly that says that there was never any authority in the first place to adopt a rule. We've got taxpayers that have filed their returns in reliance upon that, and we cannot take our tax policy in a way that we can look backwards to change the law to provide that the budget is going to be imperiled as a result of that process. So DFA would say that let's either not pass this bill as currently drafted and stop and then pick this back up again and be one of those states that has not yet adopted 671 through 679, or let's strip out this language in here that would cause all of these problems for our budget by saying that DFA never had the capacity to adopt a rule that we did 22 years ago.
The authority.
We clearly had the statutory authority to adopt this rule. And we did so.
Apparently, Les Warren doesn't think you did.
A challenge to that rule in the 22 years in court. And where we challenge a rule is when we have done an assessment of tax and the taxpayer states that we didn't have the statutory authority to adopt the rule in the first place. Well, there's a legal process that exists.
Yeah.
We should not go through special language.
DFNA is trying to protect their authority.
In a change that is trying to adopt code sections prospectively to say that everything that has happened in the prior 3 years that would be subject to an amendment would provide that to open up.
So Jackie on Facebook writes, so DFNA wants an ex post facto law passed to CYA cover your the last 22 years. That's essentially what they're doing here. Now they would say, well, we've had the authority all along. Then why do you have a problem? Go ahead. Keep going.
Budget to whatever impact might occur as a result of amended returns. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So,
Jonathan Dismay, Senator Dismay.
Here's some comments I have. We have DFA cleanup bills come through routinely. And if you'll remember, we said in here, half of us probably don't understand what's happening, and we completely trust DFA. The bill that you originally filed was not a cleanup bill. The bill that you originally filed, or that you had filed by Representative Gray, actually was retroactive in nature, which I've been told by DFA over and over again isn't possible for bills that I've had passed. My feeling is this: we put so much trust into DFA in regards to what y'all like to call cleanup. And the reality is, a lot of that is not cleanup. The reality is a lot of what is passed is actually punitive to taxpayers. It puts them in a lesser position than that of DFA in regards to litigation or whatever may be happening at that time. And I don't think you would disagree with that. I think we had some conversations and even some bills that were passed off the floor yesterday that will negatively impact some of Arkansas taxpayers that we like to call cleanup. What probably bothers me the most about all of this is the way that it was represented by DFA. And I feel in a way DFA's hand was a little bit called on it because you had someone actually research, look at, and see what the impact was going to be on their bill as originally filed in 1911, which then led to people actually paying attention, looking, and having the amended version that we have before us today. So my question is, what was your original intent with House Bill 1911? And it would have not impacted ongoing lawsuits that were in place and done exactly what you're arguing against right now. Put DFA in a stronger position in regards to those taxpayers.
Stop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to extend my...
That's a great question. And he's essentially... Dismay has just exposed the whole thing. DFA wanted the bill passed because they're in litigation right now. So we need the legislature to essentially bail DFA out because it would affect current lawsuits that are going on right now. It would give them a stronger hand against the taxpayer. And then somebody researches the bill, amends it, and now DFA is like, whoa. If this bill passes now, it's going to give the taxpayer the upper hand. We can't give the taxpayer the upper hand. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is your government at work. Let's listen to how Paul Gehring responds from DFNA. Go ahead, Joe.
My appreciation. I appreciate the members of the committee and the members of the General Assembly for the confidence and the deference that is provided for adoption of Internal Revenue Code sections. As our Constitution dictates, we can't have auto-conformity in the state of Arkansas. We are required to pass in the sessions that the General Assembly is interested in doing to re-adopt sections of the Internal Revenue Code that we have previously adopted, or in this circumstance where there are provisions in the Internal Revenue Code that have not yet been adopted. The intent, certainly, as the plain language of the bill, and I have it right here in front of me, is that the 671 through 679, as it was in existence January 1, 2018, would be adopted for the 2019 and following tax years.
Not really sure he's answering the question.
Bill that stated that anything would be retroactive.
Answer the question.
This would be applied to any earlier tax years in 2019. And as I just stated in my comments, we have no problem whatsoever with those structural changes of the bill to make it effective for 2020 and following, to provide the trust practitioners and to the taxpayers to know that we may need to rearrange our process so that this is going to be effective for the return that we file in 21 and not 2020. So and you did mention the technical corrections bill that we did provide as a part of our legislation.
That was not a technical corrections bill. I mean, technical corrections, I understand what those are. That's a changing of a word. That's a misspelling. That is something that does not have true policy change. Technical changes are not policy changes. And so I think I'm done in this committee allowing DFA to come testify that these things are called technical changes, because that puts a lot of members at ease when in reality what we're doing is changing policy. Correct?
Well, I certainly don't, Mr. Chair, we're not trying to cause any confusion whatsoever. What we regard as a technical corrections for purposes of an income tax bill that was on the floor yesterday are for code provisions of the Internal Revenue Code that are already in the code and that they have been adopted for a prior year, but however, Congress may have extended the application of that Internal Revenue Code section, or that have made minor changes in that code so that we have conformity with our
Don't worry, we're all thoroughly confused because he doesn't really want to acknowledge.
I will be happy to change any of our the words that we use. I mean, if we want to just call those bills readoption of prior Internal Revenue Codes, we're happy to change any language that we use. But I know that when it comes to the bills that are introduced, quite often in the title and the subtitle, the word technical corrections can be used in those bills. And I apologize if we have provided any confusion on the issue. We're happy to change the language that we use. But certainly when it comes to readoption of Internal Revenue, and those
just real quick, we're happy to change the language that we use. But continue doing exactly what we're doing. We'll just call it something different. What does that sound? That sounds familiar. No, never mind. That's never happened before. Doing something that you're caught doing something that people disagree with, and then you just change the name and you move on. That's never happened before. Keep going. I think Jonathan Dismang's had enough here. Listen.
Those sections, yes, Mr. Chair, because there has been so much that has occurred in Congress with our tax codes, we want to make sure that we have as much compliance as possible. This particular year, there were a number of things that there were pluses and minuses in that code, but we wanted to make it as revenue neutral as possible because we wanted to make sure that our state is in compliance as much as possible. But we were very
Garner, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to Representative Warren. When you started your testimony, something struck my ear. You said you did this as a banker, these kind of trusts for many different years. And when you started your testimony, you said that you always worked under the assumption that this was we already were codified in having to follow this federal tax code. Is that correct?
That's correct. I assumed it was law.
So you as somebody who did this in the real world worked under that assumption that this was state law. And it seems like what you're trying to do is codify that through this law so that it actually is state law, and then for the many years in the past where this has not actually been codified to address those issues. Is that the intent of this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? All right, seeing none, do we have anyone else that would like to speak for or against the bill? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close for your bill?
I would. Last thing I'd like to do is
Les Warren
sit here and testify against DF&A. I like the guys at DF&A. But when this bill came to us, it said to clarify something. This bill is not clarifying something. It is adopting the federal grantor trust laws. And that should have been spelled out that that's what this was doing. Now then, testimony was just given that we're just saying the federal grantor trust laws of January 1st, 2018, effective January 1st, 2019. Why 2018? We're already at 2019. We have a more recent version of those laws. Why wouldn't we adopt the more recent version of those laws and make them effective 2020, where everybody who utilizes trusts in our state has the remainder of this year to implement and change their trust to allow for those changes? So in my books, what we are doing is the right thing for our constituents. Now then, as far as the $20 million, I can't tell you that that is going to be an actual loss. I think that that is more of a guess of we're going to now have people come to us and we're going to lose $20 million. I don't know that they have people that right now that it's actual $20 million in losses that are going to hit us. But it still does not negate that we as a legislative body are the ones that should be enacting these federal
Stop. That's State Representative
trusts.
Les Warren. He's closing for his bill. Skip down to Blake Johnson on that list. Senator Blake Johnson has a comment because I'm pretty sure that then Senator Dismang also has another comment there because I want to make sure we get this part in. They did go ahead and do what DF&A wanted and amended the section of the bill that they wanted to. But in order for now the House Revenue and Tax Committee would have to meet again to affirm it, and we're hearing the House and Revenue and Tax Committee is not going to meet again. You know, so I don't know what's going to happen with this, but here was some of the discussion on DF&A and whether or not they're weasels or not.
I think we've given them through testimony that authority to adopt federal issues.
And I think that's what is a dispute here on this particular bill. There's no sign that we'd ever given the authority for that. I think that's part of what's being discussed right now. And if I'm kind of understanding things right, DFA utilized it when it was beneficial and didn't utilize it when it wasn't beneficial, which is
exactly
the exact opposite of the policies that we should have in place. Again, where I'm at right now is we were all fine in listening to DFA on the initial version of this bill and say that they could have the upper hand. And now we're saying as a committee, well, maybe they shouldn't have that, but neither should the taxpayer. And I don't believe that this gives anyone an upper hand because, again, this is a prospective bill, and there's some legislative intent that's not going to be in the law. That is the big concern, which again I don't believe to exist. But again, is there any other discussion? Would you like me to?
All right, stop. We're going to take a break. But hey, that's what happened, folks. That's your government at work. Senator Dismang, the Republican chairman of the Revenue and Tax Committee, there. I mean, he listened to the will of the committee. They wanted to amend it. They wanted to do what DF&A wanted because that's what the governor wanted. But seems like he's just sick and tired of DFNA misleading committees. Now, I wish this outrage would have happened last week when DFNA was misleading the Committee on the Internet Sales Tax Revenue Impacts with a revenue impact statement, a fiscal impact statement that was for a different piece of legislation. But hey, we can't all get the outrage where we would want it for political, as political goals or convenience. Anyway, we got to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Happy Monday to everybody out there. Back in a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
On those nations, and they go, oh, we really would rather you didn't publish that. I understand that completely. But at some point in time, and this was talked about over the last year or two, about if you could release those documents, I think it was probably good advice to not declassify at that point in time, to avoid any kind of claim that there was an attempt to obstruct. But the other thing is, Byron York wrote an interesting piece a day or two ago detailing the relationship between the Trump attorneys and Mueller. And I don't mean anything untoward about that relationship at all. I'm just saying that because Bob Mueller comes in, he's named the special counsel. The attorneys go, okay, we're going to cooperate fully. How many of us realized that they were cooperating fully? Nobody. And the reason they didn't is because President Trump politically needed to.
Arkansas.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So Arkansas Senate on Friday also voted in favor of defunding sanctuary cities. Is this going to get a vote in the House before session ends on Wednesday? I don't know. Things are getting tight. This could be a controversial measure. I mean, it shouldn't be, but you never know. You never know what big interests might call. Special interests might call and say this needs to be opposed. We have seen this in Arkansas before on controversial issues. not controversial with the people, but with special interests. The Arkansas Senate passed a bill which would defund cities in the state that are not compliant with federal immigration laws. This is a preemptive measure, as no Arkansas city has adopted a sanctuary policies yet, and that's a good thing. It's also a good thing to be left of bang. You want to do something before the bad thing happens. The Attorney General would hold the power to decide which cities are sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants. Texas passed similar legislation over 2 years ago. The bill passed the Arkansas Senate 24-5 and will now go for a vote in front of the Arkansas House. Let's see if that process can get moving and get passed. I think sanctuary city bill. This was a surprise. I don't think many people thought this would even get out of committee, but it did. We will see you tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great Monday, Arkansas. Be safe.